Hi theatre fans, and welcome back to my channel. Now today, Wednesday the 2nd of May, I am off to Cardiff to the Wales Millennium Centre to see the UK touring production of Titanic the musical. I cannot rave enough about this show. I saw it in the Charing Cross Theatre in London a couple of years ago. Didn't quite know what to expect. Obviously I've seen the film, but my goodness, I've never had a musical touch me or get to me as much as this did, and I vowed that if I ever came back, whether it be touring or London, I would definitely go and see it again. And if I'm being honest, even though it's here for a week, if I had the money, I would go every night. So I'm very, very much looking forward to going to see it tonight. I'm also meeting up with my friend Kieran, who's coming to tag along today as well. Love to see what he thinks of the show as well. And so a little bit early, so I'm gonna go get some food and check out what the merchandise is like and get myself a programme and enjoy the evening. Oh, and also, I'm very bunged up tonight, hence why I'm sounding ill and nasally. I'm feeling really fluey. Woke up this morning rough. I'm struggling, if I'm being honest, but I really want to see this show. So I've made it down, and I'm just going to take some couple of Lemsip, and hopefully that'll get me through the next few hours as well. So fingers crossed, I'll be all right for the show. Okay, so we've just had some food in Wetherspoons. This is Kieran. Come and say hello, Kieran.
Hi, Kieran.
And we've just been to Wetherspoons, had some lovely food, and now we're walking over to the Wales Millennium, which is over... How do I flip this? I can't flip it. Over there. It's over there behind. So we're going to go get our programme, merchandise, and it's a glorious sunny day down the bay, and looking forward to it. Okay, so I've just got my programmes, that's the small cast programme, and the souvenir brochure with all the pictures of the show, and I caved and I even got myself a t-shirt, which I will show later on when I'm home. So very much looking forward to seeing the show, sitting in row A, very good seat, great view, very much looking forward to it, very excited, and I'll catch up with you in a minute. Okay, so it's interval now, and we've just had Act 1. Kieran, what do you think of it?
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay, is it? Not quite your cup of tea, is it? But I'm loving it. I'll enjoy it. It's slightly different from the London production that I saw a couple of years ago, but I will talk about the differences later on. So going into Act 2 now. I'll see you later. Okay, so I'm home after seeing Titanic the musical. Thoroughly enjoyed, absolutely loved it. I'm very tired now, so I'm gonna head to bed, and I got work in the morning. So I'll give you my thoughts and opinions when I'm fresh tomorrow. Anyway, till then, good night. Okay, and welcome back to the review part of this vlog. So last night I went to see Titanic the musical on its current UK tour at the Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff. Now, I have seen this show before, and that was 2 years ago in the Charing Cross Theatre. And everyone knows the story of Titanic, and when I heard there was a musical of it, especially coming to London, I thought I'd have to go and see it. I knew it wasn't going to be the film version with Jack and Rose and Celine Dion in it as well. But I went very open-minded to see what it was like, because I've heard some good reviews about it. And I've got to be honest, I've never had a musical touch me or get to me as much as this show did. I mean, I was just literally blown away. I came out to this sobbing. I wanted to see it again, and and if I had the money, I would have gone to see it as often as I could up until it closed. So when I heard it was going on a UK tour, I jumped at the chance to get a ticket, and I'm so glad that I got to see it again. Okay, so the musical Titanic, music and lyrics by Maury Yeston and book by Peter Stone, is not the film version of Titanic, as many people tend to believe. In fact, the musical Titanic was released the same year as the film version back in 1997 on Broadway. But it later didn't come to the UK many years later. So a lot of people believe that when they hear the musical Titanic, they think of the film version, which this actually is not. In fact, it's completely different. So the current UK tour of Titanic is the London transfer from a couple of years ago, directed by Tom Sutherland. And it is basically exactly the same. The staging is exactly the same. The score, the music, the songs, even the choreography is exactly the same. There were a couple of minor changes which I noticed, but only ever so subtle, and I'll talk about those shortly. But one thing, for those of you that are big fans of the Titanic musical, that the London production and the current UK tour is different from the Broadway version. The Broadway version actually had the big ship on stage with different levels, first class being on the top, second and third class, which tilted, went up and down. There are little clips, snippets of it on YouTube, not many, and I would have loved to have seen the Broadway version, if I'm being honest. And if anybody has got a link or to the Broadway version, I would very much like to see that to compare. So the UK version is a lot shorter, and they've cut a lot of dialogue and scenes to make it fit in a theatre, to make it shorter, and also because the cast is so big on the Broadway version that they've had to cut it right down for the UK version. Not saying that the cast isn't big enough anyway, but it's a lot shorter, and if I'm being honest, I think it works better. I've listened to the Broadway soundtrack as well as the UK soundtrack, and there's a lot of dialogue in between the songs and scenes have been cut by the looks of it. But like I said, I can't really compare the two versions. I've not seen the Broadway. But of the UK version, I absolutely love it. Okay, so everybody knows the story of Titanic and its infamous demise, where on its maiden voyage, the Titanic set sail from Belfast, heading to New York, when 4 days later it hits an iceberg and subsequently sinks to the bottom of the ocean, with many thousands of people on board dying due to the fact that there weren't enough lifeboats on the ship, that they thought that the lifeboats would take up too much deck space, and as this ship apparently was meant to be unsinkable, that they thought, no, nothing can to break the ship, so they thought, we'll have a few lifeboats just in case, and carried on. So obviously fate played its cards, and subsequently we know what happened at the end. And that pretty much is what happens in this musical. It starts off with Thomas Andrews on stage. He actually is already on stage even before we walk into the auditorium. He is sitting at a desk drawing up plans of the Titanic, because he is the architect of the ship. And then when the show eventually does start, we skip forward a period of time where the ship has already been built and ready for launch, and we are welcomed to, in order, the crew, and then first class passengers, second class passengers, and finally the third class, before taking off, where they sing the big number, Godspeed, Titanic. So as then the story continues, you do build a connection with the characters. All the characters are introduced from all different classes. I will be honest, I felt Act 1 is a little bit slower than Act 2, and that obviously is because they're building up the connection between the audience and the characters, so that you really feel for them, their demise in Act 2. So you get to see the stories of the workers, the third, second and first class passengers, and how they all interact with each other. And then subsequently, by the end of Act 1, then the ship actually hits an iceberg. You don't physically see an iceberg, but the way they do it is very clever. The lights, white lights, get shined across the auditorium in a sweeping motion, as if we were actually heading towards this big iceberg. The music, you can tell, is building, and the big crash, and the lights go blackout, and then the curtain comes down. So that's the end of Act 1. Act 2 begins with the flooding. There is no water in this show whatsoever. A lot of it is based purely on your imagination, which you need, but it's very effective. And then it's the story of who gets saved, who jumps in the lifeboats, who doesn't, who stays on board, and who survives. Before the ending then, where they do actually sink the ship. Very clever and very effective, where the back of the stage of the ship gets lifted up, with Thomas Andrews still holding on to it, gets tilted, and the actors at the bottom then are in slow motion starting to fall backwards and fall on top of each other, as if the ship is literally tilting and going down. Very cleverly staged, I gotta say, and you could tell a lot of the audience members were impressed by it. And then at the very, very end, we have the memoriam of all the people who have died on the ship comes down from the tower, and all the names are imprinted on this huge board. And some of the actors, then the survivors, talk about how their lives changed after the sinking. And then we have the big finale of the ghost actors and the survivors all on stage, singing the finale song Godspeed, Titanic, which was performed earlier in the show. And by then, if you haven't got an apple in your throat, then I do question if you are human, because it really was a very poignant moment for it. And that's basically the whole story of the musical Titanic. Okay, so let's talk about the staging. It's a very, very simple set, and it literally is the bow of the ship on 2 levels, and joined by a flight of steps that moves around the stage, which gets used quite effectively for the bell tower when the iceberg is seen. Also for commanding passengers to enter the ship as well. Obviously props get sent on and off, but it's very simple. I mean, the staging is very, very simple, but very, very effective as well. Like I said earlier, you need to use your imagination with this show as well. For example, when they get into lifeboats, there are no lifeboats on stage. There are literally 2 ropes that get dropped down from the fly tower, and the survivors, I think it's about 6 of them, stand in a row, with 1 on each end holding the rope, and the rest of the crew then on the top tier of the staging, lowering it down. Obviously, they're not lowering, but the way it's done in slow motion is very, very effective. And then they all slowly, one by one, walk off into the auditorium, and they stand in the auditorium while singing, to indicate all the different lifeboats that have gone from the ship. There are no more lifeboats, and everyone else then who is left on stage are the ones subsequently who are going to die. And it's I can't get over the feeling you get from listening to the song, and how they've let their loved ones go, and they are there in the auditorium right next to you, and singing their hearts out to the people who are still on the ship. And all of a sudden then it's a blackout and they're gone. And you just think, my goodness, what did these people go through back in 1912? Must have been horrendous. And I certainly had a frog in my throat, or an apple, or whatever you want to call it. So the staging, very, very simple and very, very effective. And I gotta say, what I was well impressed with this production was the lighting. The lighting for this was just phenomenal. In fact, I think it was the lighting on the UK tour is actually better than the London production. Just so effective, and especially with the iceberg, when they hit the iceberg, the way the light just pans out into the auditorium, lights us all up, this big bright white light, which I don't think they had in the London production, and then the lighting from the side, from above, from behind, very, very effective, and the smoke that they used as well, very clever. So I felt there was a little couple of subtle changes. I think there were subtle changes. I'm not 100% sure because, like I said, it's been a couple of years since I saw it last. And the big difference, which I'm a little bit disappointed with, from what I can remember, was that when they're about to hit the iceberg, there is a number of cast members on stage, and they are literally all facing one way, and then they slowly move towards the front of the stage, all in unison, all in sync, and then back again, as if to indicate that the ship is literally going from side, moving from left then to right and back again, and then forward, and then all of a sudden then it hits the iceberg and it's a big blackout. And I remember that being so effective. I mean, it was put in, but I think only had about 2 members of the cast members were on stage doing that, so I didn't feel it was as effective. I could be wrong. If you've seen it and you saw the London production, you know what I'm on about, then maybe you can comment about it. But I felt that in London got to me more when I saw all the cast members literally in unison, going back and forth in unison to portray the ship turning and then hitting the iceberg. Was very clever. And I was a little bit disappointed with the UK tour production. Maybe it's because I've seen the show before and I knew what to expect. That maybe it wasn't as impactful, if that's a proper word. It didn't give me the same impact as it did originally. I'm not sure. But overall, the staging, very clever. I just loved it. The only thing I would say was, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved the show. I'm glad I saw it again. I just, personally, I think the show works better in a smaller environment, in a more intimate venue. Now, the Wales Millennium Centre, for those of you who have been there or have not been there, is a very large theatre. It's very big. And at points, I felt that the show was a little bit lost because the show the theatre is so big and it didn't have the same impact. At the same time, I didn't feel as emotional this time as I did last time. I don't know if it's because when I first saw it for the first time, I didn't know what to expect. So obviously it was a lot more provoking the first time round than the second time, maybe because I was expecting, I knew what was coming up. For example, I wasn't expecting the names to come down in the memoriam, and that just got to me straight away when I was in London. But I knew it was coming in the UK tour, so I wasn't as blown away by it. Still sad, don't get me wrong. Still, it hits you that that these names are real people who actually did die, but the impact wasn't there as much as it would have been in a smaller venue. But I don't know. I mean, it's exactly the same production, just different, so I couldn't put my finger on it. But nevertheless, I loved it. So glad I got to see it, and I can't praise or rave about this show enough. Everyone needs to go and see this show. So let's quickly talk about the cast. And I'll be honest with you, the majority of the cast are the same cast I saw in London in the Charing Cross Theatre. It was prior to that, it was in the Southwark Playhouse, which sadly I didn't get to see, but I heard loads of great stuff about that, but it's the same production. And so a lot of these cast members either were in the Southwark Playhouse or in Charing Cross, or from both. So here we have production photos from the show. I gotta say, every single cast member was phenomenal. No, I can't even pinpoint one actor that stood out for me more than the others. They all were integral to the roles, all played them brilliantly. You could relate so well to them as well, that when it came to the second half, you actually were rooting for them, and you felt the heartache and the pain in all the characters. So in the programme, they have obviously the cast bio. They have the cast bio, and it's quite a large cast. And obviously they all played all the different classes. So if, first of all you see them in first class, they quickly go get changed. They come on to second class, and subsequently third class as well. And through the whole of the show, they are playing different characters. And it's quite clever to spot how different they look. One minute the hair may be down, next minute it might be up, it might be under a hat, or they've got a scarf or a different jacket. Different makeup, even, like some of the boiler men had faces like covered in soot and dirt, and next minute they're on stage and they're looking pristine in first class lounge. I gotta be honest though, looking at the photos, I can't help but think that these are the Southwark Playhouse Charing Cross photographs, and the reason I say that is because there are a couple of photos in here of actors who were not in the UK production but were in the Charing Cross, and yet their photo is in the programme as well, which isn't a bad thing. It's just and obviously if you haven't seen the London production, none the wiser. The band as well, which was off in the wings, were phenomenal. I did find though that there was a couple of issues with the sound. A couple of times we had some feedback into the auditorium from the mics, and some mics were quite low or didn't come on for certain characters, so you missed a couple of lines as well. I'm putting that down to it being early on in the tour, and they're tweaking the sound as they're going along, but nevertheless it didn't affect the performance at all. Okay, so as I previously said, I am obsessed by this musical. I absolutely love it. I've never had a musical get to me or touch me as much as this has. And when I saw it in London, I just had to buy the CD, and I have listened to it countless times since then. And so I'm so glad that they announced it was coming on tour, so I get a chance to see it again. And I can't literally rate the show enough, and everybody I do feel has to go and see it. But my only thing I would say is, do not expect the film version, which many people do. I was speaking to a couple of ladies in the auditorium. I was actually sitting in row A, which is my go-to seat, which is very central in the stalls, not too close, not too far. And I was talking to them, and some of them didn't even know that it wasn't the film version, so they were expecting Jack and Rose and the Celine song. Some others were saying that they'd only found out earlier that day that it wasn't the film version, and that made me feel quite sad that a lot of people haven't done their research or hadn't been, which I guess if you're not a musical theatre fan you wouldn't know. I mean, if I'm being honest, even my friend who came with me thought it was the film version. He was expecting to hear the song that Celine sings, My Heart Will Go On, and I told him it's not that sort of show. So the vibe I got from the audience was quite subdued, if I'm being honest. By the time the curtain came down at the end of Act 2, there were hardly anybody standing. I literally got up voluntary, involuntary in fact, actually. I didn't even know I was standing because I was so blown away by it. I just felt that I had to stand for them because I thought it was fantastic. And I think literally about 6 or 7 people from the store stood, and everybody else just stood down. And I just felt they were just applauding because they felt they had to, and that they probably didn't appreciate the musical for what it is because the expectations was different. I even noted that some audience members didn't actually return in the second half, which is a shame because the second half is very good. And as much as I dislike certain shows, I think the respect is there to stay for the whole, till the end of the show, whether you liked it or not. So it's a little bit rude when you have to leave because you're not enjoying. But, I can understand if they hadn't been told and the expectations wasn't there, then I can understand why they left. So yeah, I absolutely love the show, and so obviously I had to get the merchandise in. So as you know, I always get a program, okay, but I also get the souvenir program if there is one available as well. This is the souvenir one, so it's quite a size difference there. And this one is what I call the picture book, and it's got some gorgeous pictures of the set there. And that one example is the Southwark Playhouse / Charing Cross one, because James Gant, who's up there, wasn't in the UK production. No, he was only in the Charing Cross one. So he's actually in that photograph. So I know that photo is old. So yeah, some lovely, gorgeous photos in here. And oh, unfortunately, I'm really embarrassed to say this, I can't remember this gentleman's name, but he was absolutely brilliant in Charing Cross. He is now playing in 42nd Street and is doing a phenomenal job there. He wasn't in the UK production, so that's an old photo as well. Okay, so Harold Bride, that's a different character. He wasn't on the UK tour as well, so that's an old photo. But yeah, you've got the cast names here as well. You don't really need both programmes, if I'm being honest. They're both equally fine, but this one has got that special little touch, I would say, to it as well. It's got the cast in it. It's got lovely photos. It's a lovely size, nice quality as well. So I do love these programs as well. And then finally, I don't normally buy a t-shirt, but recently I have noticed I have been buying a lot more of them. I tend to buy a t-shirt if it's a musical I absolutely adore. And so I am denied, but I did get myself a Titanic t-shirt. There are different t-shirts available, and that's the front there with the ship on it, and on the back it's a bit like going to a pop concert where you have the venues written on the back, and this one has the touring venues for Titanic all down the back there as well, which I haven't actually looked at properly yet, I'll be honest with you. So start off at Southampton, Belfast, Wales Millennium Centre, and it ends in August of this year in Hamburg Opera House. So yeah, still got a bit of time to go and see it. So you've got the Lowry, Salford, Dublin, Sheffield, Glasgow, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Plymouth, Northampton, Nottingham, Blackpool, Bromley, Bradford, Liverpool, and finally Hamburg. There may be further dates, I'm not sure, but anyway, if you get the chance to see it, please, please, please go and see it. Go with an open mind. Take your tissues, because it is a right tearjerker. It is brilliant. The music is stunning. The staging is stunning. So clever. And I would love to hear your thoughts and views and opinions on it. So if you have seen it or are going to go and see it, I would love to hear from you. Please leave any comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you like all my other videos or want to see more videos, then please hit the subscribe button as well. So anyway, thank you for watching, and until next time, happy theatre.